Hi, this is Dr. Lisa Solcenti, and this is my podcast. I want to welcome you today. We are going to be talking about what the differences between macronutrients and micronutrients are. And we're also going to talk about the importance of the micronutrients because those are the ones I feel really go under the radar and don't get, let's say, the social media presence that the macros do. So let's start. A macronutrient, right? They're nutrients that the body needs in large amounts. And there's three primary types of macros. You guys might know these: the carbs, the proteins, the fats. Carbohydrates, basically they provide energy, particularly for the brain and muscles. We all know about carb loading. We know about different types of carbs. I just did a podcast before this about carbohydrates and if they're friendly or not. And we talked about the different types. So please go back and listen to that one if you want to know more. But in general, real quick, as a quick summary, the really healthy carbohydrates are the plants, the fruits and the vegetables. They get a bad rap. The word carbohydrates gets a bad rap, I should say. And because we're thinking of all the starchy things, right? The breads, the pastas, the bagels, the waffles, all that stuff, the rice, the starchy things that have very little calories, and we're eating a lot of them, so we can pack on the calories a lot. But it's opposite for the complex carbohydrates, which are the plants, the vegetables and the fruits, which for the American diet, a lot of us, go for the simple carbohydrates, the starchy stuff, and we kind of stay away from the complex stuff. And that's not everybody, but in general, that's the American diet. So definitely listen about carbohydrates. It's really important to eat them, include them in your diet, and know to actually include the good ones and the healthy ones. If you're going to go to grains, know how to do that. Protein is the other macronutrient. Supports growth, repairs tissues. They're involved in various bodily functions like enzyme production. This is where we find a lot of amino acids and things that are crucial for the body, which we'll get into in the micros. Fats. They provide energy, they support cellular structure, they protect organs, they assist in certain vitamins, and definitely are important with hormone production. So fats also get a bad rap. Carbohydrates get a bad rap, fats get a bad rap. Protein seems to always be the winner. Fats, there's bad fats. There's definitely harmful fats. I'm going to actually do a podcast on fats, so definitely listen to that. But again, quickly, in a quick summary about fats, the healthy fats protect the body. They actually provide the cellular structure. They protect the blood flow, the cardiovascular, from clogging and creating plaque. They're crucial for hormone production and actually interacting with certain vitamins. So these healthy fats are crucial to the diet, just as the healthy carbohydrates are. So you got the good carbohydrates, the good fats, and then proteins, of course. Really quickly back to that, we're going to do a podcast on that one because you really want to understand good proteins versus bad proteins. So those are really the three primary types of macronutrients. The body requires macronutrients in relatively large quantities, and they're usually measured in grams. That's usually how it goes. They're the primary source of energy. So carbohydrates and proteins actually provide 4 calories per gram, while fats provide 9 calories per gram. Now, you can follow that, but when you're counting macros and you're paying attention to calories, and you can definitely lose weight by the macro counting, and you can definitely affect your hormone levels in your body, but you want to make sure you're always choosing good carbohydrates, good proteins, and good fats. That's what's crucial. The American diet tends to focus more on poor or bad carbohydrates, bad proteins, bad fats. So that's really crucial. So you could, follow all the macro stuff you want. If you're not doing it correctly with the healthy versions, it's still harmful. Okay, micros. Let's talk about them. These are actually my favorite. They're like my buddies. These are nutrients in the bodies that we do need in smaller amounts, but they're actually critical for proper functioning. And the funny thing for me is that you really get the micronutrients from eating the macros. So when you're eating food and you're eating carbs, proteins, and fats, you're actually going to get the micros by eating those. So we have this whole social media trend of, count your macros. And again, not a bad thing. But we never talk about the micros, which I feel bad for the little underdog here, because it's really probably the most important. We're eating all this food, or we're choosing our foods, whether it's wisely or poorly, right? Because the body needs micronutrients. just as important as needing the energy and the calories and the good calories for the body and the energy for the body, the driving force for the body and the cells. We also need to make sure we have all these micros. So what do they include? Vitamins and minerals. And I even included in the micronutrients the amino acids and the antioxidants, because some of these vitamins and minerals are antioxidants. So I also include amino acids in here, which are the building blocks for proteins. So it depends where you want to put them, but that's where I put them. Micronutrients are needed, yes, in smaller quantities. So they're usually measured in the smaller amounts like milligrams or micrograms. And they play key roles in processes such as the immune function, promoting growth and development, aiding in that energy production, ATP cycle, but so many things. I mean, I couldn't name all the functions that micronutrients are important. If we're talking the brain and we're talking neurotransmitters, we're going to build these neurotransmitters through amino acids. We're also going to process them and metabolize them or get to where we're going to go. You, again, listen to my neurotransmitter podcast, go to my blog and read my blogs on neurotransmitters. You want to make serotonin, you need so many micronutrients for this to work. So a lot of people are low in serotonin, they have anxiety, they're depressed, they don't feel well, but they're depleted in micronutrients, right? They're probably eating poor macros and getting poor micronutrients, and they're not making serotonin. So what quickly does the medical world do is they're going to give them these SSIs, they're going to give them drugs. I can't tell you how many patients I get, they're on 3 or 4 different types of mood enhancers and ADD and anxiety. And that's fine, but did we test their micronutrients? Did we test these? Did we see where they're deficient? You're not going to make serotonin if you don't have specific ones. You might say, well, which ones? Go to my podcast on neurotransmitters. I get into all the specifics. But again, hormones, ladies, there's so many talks about hormones and everybody getting the belly or getting tired or can't get pregnant or infertility, fertility, perimenopause, menopause, which again, I'm going to get into all of that. But you need the micronutrients to do this. You actually need the healthy fats. And guess what? Secret, you also need cholesterol, which I know that would blow people's minds, which will be another podcast. So there's lots of things that you need for these processes to happen. Vitamins, they're organic compounds, and they're really specific to specific bodily functions. We all know vitamin D is bone health, but vitamin D is also mental health. It's also behavioral and focus. It's also hormonal health. I mean, there's so many things about vitamin D that I can get on. But vitamin D, guess what? Guess what? It needs K1, it needs K2, it needs calcium, magnesium, and zinc. So you just don't take vitamin D and call it a day. You got to look at all the macronutrients. They're a family, they work together. Vitamin C, we all know, is immune function. That is not the only thing that vitamin C does. There's so many crucial things here. Minerals, these are like the inorganic elements like calcium and iron. And again, we know calcium for bones and teeth. And believe it or not, we're going to dive deep into this one next year. I'm really going to get into this because it's such a big topic. But osteoporosis and osteopenia is not a lack of just calcium. It's osteoblasts and osteoclast problem. It's actually the immune system within the bones and the matrix of the bones, and you eating more calcium isn't going to fix it. So that's just, so many things that we're taught that it's I want you to say it's like Swiss cheese, right? You're just missing so many other pieces, or it's a puzzle without the pieces, and it's just a tad bit of information, but because it's missing all the other information, you just don't really understand osteoporosis and osteopenia. Micronutrients, they're needed in smaller quantities. Again, also they're measured in I said that, right? Milligrams and micrograms, but they play this key philosophical processes. What are the differences between them? Well, again, macros are bigger, right? They're bigger and you need them in more qualities. Think of the word macro, and we know they're carbs, proteins, fats, and the micros are micro. They're smaller, needed in smaller amounts. Some of these micros, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, A, D, E, and K are called fat soluble, right? They can't be broken down quickly. They have to be converted to a water soluble thing. So those we have to be taking carefully and pay attention to in a different way, where all the other ones can be, peed out quite easily. So vitamin A, real quick, is just a few, but it's so many functions for vitamin A: vision, immune function, skin health. And carrot, sweet potato, spinach, kale, eggs, liver, dairy products. Vitamin C, again, immune function, but also skin health, wound healing, and it's also anti-inflammatory, which I find to be one of the biggest crucial roles of vitamin C. So if you have I have autoimmune disorders, so any autoimmune disorders, any kind of dealing with neurotransmitters, brain, if I'm dealing with hormones, anything I'm dealing with, we want vitamin C. Citrus fruits, oranges, lemons, strawberries, broccoli, tomatoes are vitamin C, just for example. Vitamin D, bone health, calcium absorption, right? That's what we think, but tons of other stuff, which I just talked about. And your fatty fishes, right? Salmon, mackerel. Sunlight is actually the best form of vitamin D. And believe it or not, you got to take off your sunblock. I have a podcast on this, and I have an amazing blog on this, because I go over sunscreens. I go over which ones are good, which ones are bad, and why. I talk about the chemical sunscreens versus the mineral sunscreens, and why the chemical ones block vitamin D, and that is not good for us. Vitamin E acts as an antioxidant, so it's protecting us just like vitamin C does. Super important for immune system function, and cellular protection is really key. A lot of diseases, if not maybe all, are really inflammation that leads to like cellular death or cellular confusion. Vitamin K is necessary for blood clotting and bone health. So that's the main thing that vitamin K is for. But again, you need it for processing D. Actually, vitamin K and vitamin B, all the Bs, the B vitamins, I should call it, they are dependent upon your gut microbiome. I did a podcast in the very beginning of the season. So if you go back to the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s, the very beginning podcast, I talk about microbiome, but I just did one recently. So the microbiome is really, really important for you to metabolize your B vitamins and your K vitamins. K is green leafy vegetables, kale, spinach, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, so the greens. Bees, oh my gosh, the B vitamins are probably one of the most important vitamins. I never really realized this until I got deep into neurotransmitters, and I got deep into women's health, and thyroid needs the B vitamins, the neurotransmitters need the B vitamins. It just goes on and on. The list goes on and on. Energy production, brain function, hormone production, red blood cell formation. Pretty much, I would say it's. I find it everywhere. And maybe not all of them are in everywhere, but there's a bunch of them. And we're talking folate, B6, B12, B1, B2, B3. There's a B5, and so they're very involved with the body. Meat, eggs, dairy, legumes, seeds, leafy greens. And if we do greens, we're talking whole grains, not the bad carbs, not the processed ones. Minerals is calcium, we talked a little bit about, has a lot of stuff with nerve signaling, muscle function, and of course bone and teeth health is what it's known for. Everybody thinks calcium is dairy, so if you don't do dairy, you're never going to get calcium. It's fortified in almost everything. I'm pretty sure the almond milk I take is fortified with calcium. I'm pretty sure the oatmeal I take, is fortified with calcium. So it's pretty equivalent, but naturally in the dairy. And I think it's fortified in some of the dairy too. I can't remember the logistics on that, but calcium's not just dairy. Is my whole point of that. Leafy green vegetables, tofu, and then again, those plant-based milks have it fortified in it. Iron. Oh, really big one too. Don't really realize, we all know maybe iron's for energy. It's definitely got something to do with your blood, right? Your blood cells, your heme, but it also has a lot to do with neurotransmitters. I see it everywhere in the neurotransmitters, and has a lot to do with the metabolism of energy and the Krebs cycle and stuff like that. Magnesium, okay. This one's really, I call it the University of Social Media, is out there. It really tends to be misleading. So I have never found it deficient. I can't say never. Maybe there's 5 people out of all the people I've tested. But when I hate to use the word never. Sorry, I apologize. But it's rarely deficient in my patients. And you will go and listen on social media. It's the number one deficiency. It's always deficient. I don't see it in my practice. I just don't see it deficient. What I do see is it's very therapeutic. And you can take it for certain instances, and it works really, really well. But it's not necessarily due to deficiency. I think it's due to the fact that you can just process it and use it in certain processes or sequences or equations in the body. So magnesium we know is actually great for sleep. It's actually great for calming. It's fantastic for thyroid health. It's really, really good for, calming down and being anxious. It's fantastic for constipation. So those are just a couple things. It's not maybe that you're deficient in it. It's just very therapeutic. Nerve function, muscle function, blood sugar regulation, bone health. It definitely plays with calcium, magnesium, and zinc. I have seen it in many processes that's needed, and it's in nuts, seeds, leafy greens, legumes, and the whole grains, not the crappy carbohydrates. Zinc plays important in many things, especially immune system. That's the number one. I see it. DNA synthesis, really important. Again, cellular death, cellular falling apart. You want to protect the cells. And genes, we're learning a lot about genes now. I can't even get into it in this podcast, but we're learning about genes changing. We always thought they stayed the same, and now we're starting to realize they possibly change, and they can change for the worse, Meat, shellfish, legumes, seeds, and nuts. Potassium, again. We know fluid balance regulates electrolyte, right? Potassium and sodium, nerve singles, muscle contractions, bananas, potatoes, spinach, avocados, and beans. And we have iodine in here. Super, super important. One of the other, again, social media university, Google University, whatever you want to call them, really an argument out there, really gets a bad rap, poor iodine. One of the problems I had, please go back and watch listen to my thyroid podcast. I have a whole series there. There's 4 or 5 podcasts. I walk you through all about the thyroid, which is a lot of these guys that we're talking about. Zinc, selenium, magnesium, iodine, really, really important. B2 and B3 for thyroid, like crucial. And so I was deficient in iodine and didn't realize it because I avoid salt like the plague, and it wasn't taking the right salts because the refined salt's not the good salt. I go through all that stuff. We want iodized salt, but we want it in the natural form, which is sea salt. You want it in the actual salt, that rock that rock that's getting broken down into salt, not processed, not refined, not bleached, none of that stuff. Seafood, dairy products, eggs, essential for thyroid function and metabolism regulation. And honestly, if you read Dr. Brownstein's book on thyroid, he goes over all the studies and the stats behind what I'm about to say, that a lot of thyroid deficiencies are due to iodine deficiencies. So lots of minerals and lots of micronutrients that we've touched upon. Big difference, right, between the macros and the micros. But do you see how the micros are super important? I'm not downplaying the macros. The macros just get so much attention, and I really wanted to draw into the micros. So some tips about getting enough micronutrients, I'm going to give you 4. One is eat a variety of foods. So, I tend to eat the same things all the time, and then I have to remind myself, change it up. So a balanced diet of mixed fruits, fresh fruits and vegetables. If you're going to do grains, do whole grains only and make sure they're not, the bad things. Lean proteins, healthy fats, and again, we'll talk more about in the podcast of the differences between these. Whole foods, so unprocessed foods. Avoid the processed foods, avoid the packaged, the box foods. Start taking your foods and turn over and read the ingredients. Everybody sends me when they go, hey doc, can you read this? You think this is good? Everyone sends me the nutrition panel. That doesn't give me much information. I can see how many calories per serving are there. I can look at the carbs, fats, proteins, and kind of look. But the most important label on the food is the ingredients. And that label is actually the most important. So I want to see, how processed is this food? How whole is this food? How much garbage is in this food? Is it really a food? Because I'm very, very, very picky about what I consider food and what other people consider food. So you want to make sure that the food is nutrient packed. You want to make sure that they have a ton of micronutrients. That's my whole game here. That's what I want you to learn on this podcast. Make sure that your foods are jam packed with micronutrients. That is the key to health, which means make sure they're rich in vitamins and minerals, which processed foods are not. And enriching them and fortifying them is not really the way to go. That's all synthetic stuff. So include yourself with a diverse range of fresh foods, especially plants, the veggies and the fruits, and then, these lean, healthy proteins. And if you're going to do grains, I would make sure that they're healthy and the good fats. The last thing is to consider micronutrient testing. I'm going to leave you with that. My micronutrient testing is really, really unique to the medical field testing. So let me just explain the difference between functional medicine, micronutrient testing, and the regular medical world testing. So we do the medical world testing. We run the blood panel. You can do this two ways, but the best way to do it is a blood draw. And what we do is we test over 30 micronutrients. So it's all your vitamins, your minerals. We do the amino acids, and we do antioxidants and omegas. Omegas are those healthy fats, those 3s and 6s. So we test all of this. It's a big panel. And we test the medical model. We follow that, which is how much vitamin A or how much vitamin D or B do you have floating around in your blood. So when you're looking at the blood, we're looking at the liquid part of the blood, the part that's outside the cells, and we're saying, hey, how deficient is this person? How much is in the blood? That's the medical model. So we do that, we run that. Then the other thing that functional does, that medical doesn't do, is we're going to look inside the cell. So now this is intracellular. The other one's called extracellular. So we do both of these. And the intracellular is looking inside the cell and how well the cell is doing with that micronutrient. So in other words, you got to look at it like, is the cell deficient in vitamin A or vitamin B or vitamin D? So it could be floating around your blood fine, but we want to see, is the cell functioning? Is it getting in there? Is the cell working properly? And so to me, that gives me a really good look on how well the person's dealing with the micronutrients. A lot of times I see it fine in the blood, but I see all the cells deficient. Now there's several reasons for this, and that's what we discussed, when you're working with me. But that's really, really crucial to know about the intracellular level of micronutrients. And that's, I feel, what's lacking in the medical world. The last thing I like to say about micronutrients is when you eat, right? You're eating. Let's say you eat super healthy. I have plenty of, usually women, no offense, men, but I have plenty of patients that come in and they eat great. They eat fantastic. They work out. They're super zoned in on their health. They kind of know what they're doing. They might know their macros and they know their micros. But I run the micronutrient panel and they're deficient in so many things. And they go, how is this possible? How is this possible? I don't even like supplements. I get all my vitamins through food. And it's not that the food is depleted. I know that that's another thing that's out there. And I'm not saying the soil is wonderful today, but I see plenty of people with good levels too. So I've seen people that you could test them and they don't really need a lot of supplements. They're doing great. But in some cases, when patients come in and they say to me, hey, I eat really healthy, I'm doing really well, how are these vitamins deficient? If your gut is not working properly, if your gut is inflamed, if you have a leaky gut and the gut wall is not absorbing things correctly. So you eat food, right? You eat really healthy or you don't. But let's just say you're eating healthy and the food gets into your, stomach and it gets digested, it gets broken down, and it goes through your digestive tract. When it goes to the part where you're going to start absorbing the micronutrients, you're going to absorb the nutrients, right, into the body so the body gets all the stuff it needs to make everything and function. If that gut wall isn't working properly, it doesn't necessarily absorb these well. It doesn't allow these to permeate and leave the gut and get into the blood. So it doesn't get into the cell. It doesn't get very far. Sometimes we have inflammation in the blood because that inflammatory process leaves the gut and gets into the blood. So then sometimes we have these cytokines, these inflammatory particles actually leaving the gut, competing for the gut wall, pushing away the micronutrients, or if they both get into the blood, they compete there. So just think of a big traffic jam going on at the gut wall, like if I don't know if you live near New York, but the Lincoln Tunnel, like trying to get through the tunnel. They're all fighting for the space. The bigger ones push the little ones out of the way, which are typically, sometimes they're food particles, sometimes they're bacteria, sometimes they're just nasty little things like cytokines, and they just don't let the micronutrients out. Let's say they get in the bloodstream, then you kind of have a traffic jam out there. So inflammation is not your friend. It's not a good thing, and that's creating a leaky gut and a gut wall. It's not working properly. Inflammation creates cellular dysfunction and cellular death eventually. So it's just not a happy thing, and this is what functional medicine works on. This is what we do and why we differ from the medical world. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just that they're different. Same with macros and micros. One's not better than the other. They're different. I just feel like the little guys, they just don't get heard or they're not heard. So that's why this podcast is there today. So again, don't take my podcast for your medical care, in place of your medical care, anything like that. Please take this as education, and I hope you continue listening and you learn a lot. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me at info@drlisasolsenti.com, or just go to my website, drlisasolsenti.com, and you can contact me there. Thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.